Hi and welcome everyone. My name is Andreas Graf and I would like to welcome you to the Makerspace Inspirational Series. We are here at Oslo Met today and this is actually the kickoff to this new event series. So at home you might wonder what is an inspirational series and what are we actually doing here. As an educator, I've been thinking quite a lot for the past few months of how to better educate my students and my co-workers and everyone else being involved with university affairs. Given the restrictions we face with COVID-19, teaching has been mostly digital and a lot of students suffer from an overload of Zoom meetings, PowerPoint presentations, and so on and so forth. Back in the day when I was a student, I was thinking quite a lot about what to do with my life once I reached the stage of graduating and in which direction I would like to move. Over the years, I've learned this is quite an issue to a lot of people in life, not only students, but I also see this with fellow employees, colleagues, and friends. A lot of us struggle and try to figure out where we would like to go and where we would like to end up. I've seen the times with these restrictions as quite an opportunity for myself as well to work on side projects we have been putting off for quite a long and actually trying to figure out where I would try to go in life. Today, in relation to International Women's Day on Monday, I'm actually welcoming 3 fantastic women at Oslo Met today who are willing to share their story with us of how they walked through life and of how they ended up where they are today. And it is my hope that you at home on the screen share this story with me and hopefully take something inspiring away from it for your own life. Traveling all the way from Australia today is my first guest. I mean, she didn't travel here. She has been living here. She has been living here for quite a while already. But she works as a coach here in Oslo, mostly with startups and big shot companies or blue chip companies. And she's here today to tell us a little bit of what she's doing in life and how she ended up in Norway. Marion, welcome. It's nice to have you here. You're working as a coach primarily, so what does that entail and what are you actually doing? A coach sounds very, very promising and exciting, but it's a very broad job definition, I would argue.
Well, it was funny because when we were outside having a chat and, you know, you guys were asking what I was doing, I'm like, well, I'm not quite exactly sure what I do. Because there's so many elements to it, I think. So I work with startups, helping them go from ideas to scaling a business.
Yeah.
And then I also work with corporates on things like leadership strategies. It could be particular areas that they want to innovate or grow and develop as a team or as an organisation. So I kind of feel like the nexus between those two roles. So I get this kind of like fast kind of spark of working with startups, and then on the other side, probably more of the the resources and the ability to actually go far with things. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. It sounds very exciting. So is it, do you focus on a particular kind of startup, or is it really like, all walks of life which come together?
So I think for me I have quite a breadth of working. Like I started working in advertising and I was working with small business entrepreneurs to start with. And so I really was deep diving into their business. So I was actually in radio and TV, and it wasn't so much about whether they were on radio or TV or how they did their marketing as much as it was like, what are they actually doing with their business? How are they making it grow? How do you improve efficiencies? And I sort of got really curious into that. So it was beyond kind of the ideas of the campaign and how they worked. So I was really lucky that I got that breadth of experience at quite a young age. And so now I think with the startups, so I'm working with startups in the Charge Incubator program. So that's really focused on first and second generation immigrants that come to Norway and have a business idea and kind of either don't know where to start or need to scale up. Yeah. So that's one of the ones that I do. And then I work with companies in, for example, Startup Lab as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. It's great you mentioned Startup Lab because my second guest Katrine.
Yeah.
You're still struggling with the Norwegian, but you have your offices in Startup Lab, or pretty much at the Forskningsparken next to Startup Lab.
Yeah, it's in Oslo Science Park.
Yeah, and you work in a startup, or you lead a startup which is dealing with monitoring of migraine and developing solutions for clinical trials, if I understood that correctly.
Yeah, so in Nordic BrainTech we developed a digital treatment for migraine headaches.
Yeah.
And this is actually research from NTNU and St. Olav's Hospital, and we commercialize it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Mhm.
So are you in the process of scaling up, or is there like still a product development phase, or
Yeah,
which phase are you in?
Yeah, we're still in product and technology development and planning a new clinical trial and planning everything that needs to be finalized before we go to market, really.
Ah, so who is your main customer? Do you sell this to private people, or is it like really hospitals and companies who use that?
Yeah, it will be both, but
Okay.
to begin with, we think it will be the end user, so the migraine sufferer itself.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then my third guest, she grew very famous with her blue hair. Some of you might have seen her Monday interviewing with Erna Solberg. Charlotte. Yeah, welcome at Oslo Met as well. So you work with a technology that is attempting, or I think it's actually working, to prevent food waste. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's for sure working.
It's for sure working. Yeah, that's
we
good.
spent 3 years and it's working. So
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. So what is your product actually doing? It's a software product from what I understand.
yeah, so to keep it short, we have developed a software solution that helps. We're focusing now on the public sector actually. So we're helping elderly centers and schools and kindergartens get control over their food inventory.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So just to give some background to the story as well, I have worked a lot in the food industry and I know the pain of food waste. I have walked the aisles of a grocery store looking for food that was about to expire or had expired. And dealing with food waste, first of all, is just one of the most stupidest problems we have. And then it's a lot of manual work involved dealing with food waste. And the main reason why we waste so much food is because of the expiration date. So we basically just help our customers get control of their food inventory based on expiration date. And that has actually worked, and we're preventing food waste from even happening, which is fun.
It seems like it's a fairly simple solution to a big problem. I read on your homepage you're actually quite active in writing a blog. And I read that worldwide speaking, it's about a fourth or a third of food is going to waste. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So with that technology you have now, is there any significant savings to this process?
Yeah, so the fun thing is that we now have more and more numbers. And as you mentioned, like 1/3 or almost 2/3 of all the food that we produce every year is wasted, which is horrible. And then we have been able to reduce food waste within our customers up to 85% within a year. So for last year, we were able to save 778 tons of food from being wasted.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
So that's fun. So actually seeing the numbers now is, it's amazing.
Does that really help? I'm just curious, does it really help in the first place to reduce the amount of food which is produced? Because obviously we don't need that much, or is it more an attempt to redistribute? I mean, what I'm saying is we all have seen these pictures, for instance, when this winter storm hit Texas, a lot of people start going to food banks and get their food there because they cannot afford to buy it anymore and stuff is running out. Or we see in Ireland, some supermarket shelves are empty now because of Brexit. So is that actually something you do as well, trying to redistribute the food in a better fashion?
Yeah, for sure. And not to get too nerdy about the subject, but the entire food value chain is so interconnected. So if you do something within one level of the value chain, in our case, for example, we work with everything from grocery stores to elderly centers and so on. So if you prevent food waste from happening there, you would prevent it from happening across the entire value chain. And then now, because of COVID, it's actually more food waste because the supply chain has stopped and the entire food value chain is so traditional and the distribution is so bad. So when stuff like borders are closed and when restaurants and hotels are just closed, a lot of the food just is sitting.
Sits there.
Yeah. So the COVID situation has just accelerated the need for technical solutions within the value chain, which is good for us because we can help. But it also puts a light in regards to the food value chain in regards to how broken it actually is. COVID has been interesting in that regard. But we're trying to help where we can.
No, I would imagine. It sounds so fantastic. And in a way, it's always like, I think in the tech scene especially, these Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations have been sort of this focus point for a lot of us. And speaking about the Sustainable Development Goals, Marion, you have a sort of a little side business it's called Rage for Climate you run as well. So what are you doing there? Or what's the focus? Or it seems like you're involved in so many projects. I find it quite hard to believe you find the time for that as well.
I don't know how I do either, and I think it's just gotten worse in COVID. I'm just like, if I wasn't a workaholic before. But I think that's interesting because a lot of the corporate clients now are saying, okay, we need workshops on work-life balance and how to get, better flow and focus so we're not always in meetings, or mental health is such a big thing now. And I'm thinking, okay, I need to get this right so I can teach this. So that's a big part of my job now. But with Rage for Climate, so it's going along. So the CEO of Empower, Wilhelm, is him and I were talking about a project, and that was, I started in the Oslo blockchain cluster, I think it was almost 2 years ago now. And we were talking about this project and the fact that a lot of people don't realise that we still don't have, we're not fully renewable with our energy. Yeah. So what are the ways in which we can push more green energy into the grid, not just in Norway, but, Europe-wide, and, do more to sort of create that shift. So, for example, with businesses who are looking at, trying to make more sustainable choices with their energy. So we started developing some off-site solar parks, and that's kind of in the development stage still. So that's it's kind of because of COVID, it's a bit on hold, but just incrementally moving forward.
It sounds like an interesting hobby just to start another business.
Yeah, I mean,
why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
I think when you're really passionate about things, you think, okay, there's an opportunity, and how can we get this moving? I mean, if we weren't working interstate and we had a faster launch before COVID, it's hard because, especially as a foreigner, if you're, to be in a startup, you have to raise money and you have to raise enough to have a salary for yourself so you can stay in the country. Yeah. And so it's quite challenging if you're bootstrapping in a company to do that. And so because I have experience working for myself already, so I started having with a creative agency, and I moved on to more like consulting and strategy. I was really fortunate that I was able to just go into that and go, okay, especially during COVID, that's the focus, and this is how I'm working. To make sure I don't get kicked out of the country. No, but I love what I do as well.
As a fellow foreigner, I can feel we all sort of need to make our contribution.
Yeah, and I think it is really important to, you've got to, I think for me, I'm a big believer in, have something that's your bread and butter, especially if you want to have a startup, and get something off the ground. But, have that working on the side. Yeah. And, if it's something that you want to take on or build a team around, do that, but make sure you've got some kind of a stable base. But I think the great thing about Norway is that, you've got this entrepreneurial dagpenger with NAV that there's Innovation Norway funding things like this that can give you kind of a kickstart. Yeah.
Is that part of the reason why you actually ended up in Norway? Because it seems like there's no bigger distance to travel pretty much from Australia to Norway. Well, how did you end up here?
It's actually really random. But I had gone on a trip to Silicon Valley, and I was on an international exchange with my MBA program. And I was like, I was working in politics in Sydney, and I was in the entrepreneurial space, and it's like, how can we make a more fertile environment for entrepreneurs to thrive? And we weren't really doing much in the startup space at the moment. So I went over there, and I'm like, these people are crazy enough to think they're big ideas are going to put a dent in the world, and they somehow do. And at the same time, the politics was changing. It looked like Trump was coming into power. So, because I was like, yeah, okay, this is where I want to move. This is the opportunity. And then seeing this roll out and being in politics myself, I kind of went, okay, maybe it's a career move, but lifestyle move? What's this going to be? So I was chatting to a mentor of mine, and he said, okay, he was an adjunct professor at Copenhagen Business School, and he was like, why don't you consider the Nordics, like Scandinavia? And I was like, what?
Never heard of that.
And he was telling me about Sweden and some of the biggest investment funds and the startups and Spotify and, just the kind of bringing in talent and moving through the, startup to scaling phase, and how much more mature it was there. So I was like, okay, this sounds interesting. And then all these kind of serendipitous things happened at the same time. I got a work opportunity to be in Dubai, and then I connected with a guy that I met when I was living in Cologne in Germany, who happened to be Norwegian and just moved back from Germany.
Yeah.
And so all these things kind of happened, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to go there. And I put out to my network, I was like, okay, so if you know anyone in this sort of innovation space and da-da-da. And so I got a lot of contacts from that. And then I got a job opportunity with an organisation that promotes innovation for government to the Swedish government.
Yeah.
And then I ended up facilitating this collaborative innovation with NASA. The people consultants from
So
NASA.
you've been everywhere.
Asking me a question can you do this collaborative innovation? We've got these people from NASA. I'm like, shit. What do I say to them? And then I was like, I can do that. And then at the same time, then coming back, so I thought maybe Stockholm was where I was going to go. And then I joined the Catapult Future Fest. And there was a UN Women Blockchain Hackathon at the same time. And that was part of the festival. And so I joined this, and I sort of jumped in and thought, I want to learn more about blockchain. And that's when I met the guys from VipiCash, which is the first startup, that I'm the co-founder in. And then we just got all this kind of we won this competition along with Duala, another startup, and then we pitched to Metamarit, and then investors wanted to talk to us, so they're like, would you join the team? And it was so serendipitous.
That sounds like a lot of random coincidences sort of find their way together, and you end up here.
And I think that's the thing, though. I think, now in hindsight, so whether you're a student coming out of your studies, or whether you're a foreigner, or just trying to pave your way into something new, if you kind of think of it like planting something, I don't know, in a pot, and you're sort of sprinkling the seeds. Not every seed is going to plant, but if you put yourself out there and you think, okay, how can I help others, or how can I contribute, something's going to grow.
Where would you start then? Is it something developing your own set of values where you want to move in that direction, or is your point rather just start somewhere and then find your way through the haze? Or
I think, I don't know what you guys think, but I'm go to what you're passionate about. And I think sometimes it's overused. What do you drive? What do you burn for? And you're okay, I did this, burn for this yesterday, but not today. And, sometimes that changes. But I think, for me, I'm really passionate about finding out what other people are passionate about. And so it gives me energy to go, okay, how can I help you get from A to B? And what's the roadmap to get there? And what's the strategy? Or how do I facilitate as a coach? So, different things like that. So I think that's one thing. But if you have an idea of a problem or an opportunity, I think the other thing is just testing and talking to people that might share the same problem, or just getting out there and meeting people and seeing how you can help and add value to others, and then test and try things out for there.
A try as you go approach. That's good. I like that. So just a quick side note, if you joined us a little late, again, I would like to welcome you to the Makerspace Inspirational Series. What I forgot to mention in the beginning is we're trying to keep this as interactive as possible. So if you have questions to our audience today, feel free to drop comments, a question, make sure to address who the question is going to, and then we'll make sure and try to answer it. Back to you, Catherine. You have been working in a couple of different jobs before. I could figure out you were a project manager and you worked at NTNU as a teaching assistant. And how did you end up working in a startup which is dealing with brain research, pretty much?
Well, I'm really amazed by your stories, and my story is not that long.
Yeah.
So I graduated from high school in 2012 and started right on to my studies in chemical engineering and biotechnology. And I finished that and I moved on to something called NTNU School of Entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And at that time, or after that, I started Nordic Brain Tech. So I did academia for 7 years and then right on into startup.
Yeah.
But during those 7 years, I was really focused on building a skill set and kind of planting many seeds.
Seeds,
And also taking all opportunities that you have. So what can you do at the university? Well, you can be engaged in many different things. Student organizations, being a teaching assistants, doing stuff at university. And I think that was kind of my, how I have kind of succeeded with the startup thing right now. Because I've built this skill set of working in team, trying to be a leader in many different teams, and communication skills and everything you need to have the best pre-qualifications for running a startup. Yeah.
Where did the actual idea pop up? I mean, I learned quite late that I actually have a couple of friends who have migraine. I'm one quite fortunate, for instance. I never had it, so but I feel like it's a big issue for quite a few people out there, right?
Yeah, it is. So 14% of the population are affected by
14. Wow.
Yes, and 75% of them are women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this project.
An explanation. No.
Yeah. This was actually a research project since 2015, where it was actually started with a medical student, digging into research on how we can treat adolescents and kids having headache and migraines, because there are really few solutions today. So they started to look into something called the biofeedback, which is a technique you can do today with stationary equipment and a physician, where you do a biofeedback session. It's kind of like a relaxation training thing. But anyways, they looked into how we can move this therapy from the hospital to the home so everybody can have access to the treatment. So that was the background for the project, and they did several scientific publications. And at one point I worked at NTNU Technology Transfer Office with this research group, and we together founded the company. And that was how it kind of started in 2019. And we're still only 3 full-time employees, but we are 7 co-founders. And really in the
7. It's a large group.
That's
so
really impressive.
Yeah,
you should talk yourself up.
But how come it's? I'm quite curious. I mean, you mentioned you have a degree in chemical engineering and the entrepreneurship school. So where and how do you develop the necessary skill set? I understand Nordic Brain Tech is working quite a bit in the data science and machine learning track as well. It's not necessarily something you learned at school, I would assume.
Well, so some of the co-founders are within the engineering space, robotics, data science, and we have 3 medical doctors. So that part is covered not by me, but at NTNU we're very fortunate to have a course in kind of innovation and business development pretty early on in 3rd grade. And at that point I was introduced to innovation, entrepreneurship, and things I had never heard about before, and also something called Gründerskolen in Oslo. So I attended that and went to San Francisco. I worked in a startup company for the summer, and I was just really inspired, and I wanted to move on with entrepreneurship instead of doing chemistry, because I couldn't really see myself in a chemical engineering job. I also applied for a consultancy job during my last year at the chemical engineering study, but I just I don't think that was something for me. I wanted to do something else. Yeah.
But I would assume it takes quite a bit of courage of taking this like step and be like, okay, I have this idea now, I just go for it. Because I mean, a lot of startups still fail varying according to source, but of course it's roughly speaking about every second startup fails. So it takes quite a bit of courage to make this jump and be like, I'll just try it.
Yeah, but then I want to emphasize NTNU School of Entrepreneurship, because when you attend that master's course, you have to start a startup. You are kind of forced to start.
Requirement.
But that makes you also, it's much easier to just do it and then do it again, and you also learn to fail. So we did that with our first startup at the NTNU School of Entrepreneurship. We kind of crushed it, and then we moved on with our new projects. And I think that's a skill you can learn, as with any other skill, the entrepreneurial mindset.
So is that something you would recommend to our students here at Oslo Met? Or if you could give a recommendation, what would be the most intriguing skill to invest in? What should they learn aside from mathematics and social science and health science and what we offer here?
Yeah, I think it's really about this entrepreneurial mindset, to be creative and also take all opportunities you have to try to be as motivated as you can into a subject, whatever it is. But the skill of really being 100% focused into one thing, and just do that.
I mean, now you speak like in terms of like, I would assume retrospectively it was like, oh, we started this business, we failed, and then we moved on. But I would assume there was quite a bit of hardship involved as well. And obviously, you start a little something, there's emotions involved, and you don't just move on. So there's a learning process, and I would assume you face quite a bit of hardship as well with Nordic Brain Tech in the beginning. So how do you overcome that, and how do you motivate yourself?
Yeah, good question. It's really, I think it's about the vision that we have, which is uniform in our team. We work towards launching this product in a huge market to people who really have huge unmet needs. And that's what we have with us every single day. And working towards that is just really motivating. So that's what's driving us every day. And we know it's going to be really hard. It's, tough times with funding sometimes, and salaries are low, and we try to bootstrap, but we know that we will make it one day, and that will be such a huge impact. So,
That's wonderful. I mean, from what I understand, with my limited knowledge, is migraine has been a topic in research for the longest time. So there's researchers all around the world investigating it, and obviously there's not a lot of solutions to it. So I consider it quite a brave step, and we're like, I'll just try that. Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Did you struggle with migraines yourself, or Okay. So that was your experience with the first-hand experience with pain.
Yeah, so I kind of know about migraine headaches, and also somewhat familiar with the neurospace in Norway, and I was really just I had some pre-knowledge on the space, and that made it easier to pick that idea moving forward.
Do you still struggle with migraines, or have
sometimes?
You
but I don't have it that frequent, but it's a couple of times a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been able to test the solutions on yourself. Because I remember when I struggled also with migraines in the past when I was younger, and my brother used to laugh at me so much when I used to kind of walk into the dishwasher and know everything, because my head was just so that was horrible. But I'm done with the migraines now. But I don't know what did it. I don't know why I'm not having it.
Many things.
Yeah.
Why
I think that's part of the question, isn't it? But Charlotte, you yourself, you started out at Kiwi, I've heard. You worked as a shop assistant there, and then inspiration striked, and you're here with Total Control nowadays, which has 25 people, I think, working for it.
24 at the moment.
24.
Yeah. So we're quite a big team. But I have we have 3 different stories in regards to how we got into entrepreneurship, because I actually did the kind of the good girl route in regards to not dealing with entrepreneurship. I don't know if anybody told me about entrepreneurship when I was young.
Just the natural.
I was just, okay, let's go to that school because somebody says you have to go to that school.
Yeah.
And let's make sure you get a high-paying job, get an apartment, get that stability that you need to be able to function.
Yeah.
So I actually I have a master's degree. I've worked since the ages of 12 and played football, so I've always been working and active and doing school at the same time. And then some of the jobs that I had has been within the food sector, like Kiwi.
Yeah.
And then I think my first time travel or staying in Oslo, which was in 2007, I went to school at Ås. I took my master's there. And then I also worked in restaurants and grocery stores and got that first-hand experience with food waste as an issue in that sector. But I didn't start Total Control before 2017. So there was a lot of years in between actually having food waste as a problem to actually starting the company, because I basically was living up to everybody else's expectations of me rather than doing what I wanted to do. So when I had done all of the things on my bucket list, like X amount of money earned, had the place to live and so on, then I started thinking about, okay, what do I actually want to do? So then I have a book, because usually when you're an entrepreneur you have something called the popcorn brain, where you have a lot of ideas. And then I had written down a lot of those ideas, and one of the ideas was the solution that I made when I worked in the grocery store, because I spent a lot of time walking the aisles of the grocery store, as mentioned. I started to write down the product names and the expiration date in a notebook, just to make sure that the employees of the grocery store could go directly to the food to make sure it was sold or used or given to charity instead of ending up in the trash. So that manual notebook I then in 2017 started to digitize. So learned how to code. I still worked full-time with my in my current job, which was as a chief engineer in the construction industry. So totally different than food waste. So my journey has been somewhat of short in regards to the entrepreneurial space. Only 3 years, had to learn everything. Never went to entrepreneurial school or never had any networks prior that was of entrepreneurs. But I figured out my family has a lot of entrepreneurs, but I didn't know that from before. Yeah. So it was definitely a new journey. So I would say, like, I hope everybody starts a business, because you learn so much, and it gives you such great value, and it's a lot of up and down, but it's definitely worth it once you get started.
That's interesting. You pretty much started from scratch, but interestingly enough, I learned you worked at Burger King many years before. I would assume it's probably as a youngster making some money on the side. But is that whole story of being in contact with the food industry and actually seeing issues everywhere, is that what actually made the difference for you? Because I believe also, you know, at some point you have to drop your job in construction and be like, I'm really doing this now. I must imagine it's also quite hard, or it takes quite a bit of courage to do that step, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was just by coincidence that I had jobs within the food industry, because I had like 2-3 jobs besides school, besides football and so on.
That's how you gotta hustle.
Yeah.
You're a kid as well.
But it's fun to work, and it's fun to see results, and I think I've always been that way, just kind of going and having goals and like trying to achieve them. But in regards to your questions, what's your question?
No, I
the red thread with the food.
Food, yeah.
And also like dropping your job in construction and then pretty much take this transition period to start a business must be a challenge in a way, right? But I understand you like challenges.
I do. It's definitely, I've taken the hard route in a lot of cases. And I think, like, I don't know if you guys feel it, but I've always felt like I was meant for something bigger than I was working 9 to 5, perfect for those who can do it, but it's not for me. So I always felt like there was something more that I wanted to do. I wanted to make an impact, leave a legacy, do something greater. And when I started the company, I felt like, okay, this is what it's meant to do. I did not, as a little girl, think I was gonna work with food waste. So this was a new area, and I also didn't think I was going to work with technology. So yeah, it was just.
So what was it? What did you want to be as a little girl?
Good question. I don't know. Probably something within sports, I would say. Yeah.
But it's quite interesting. I realized. So for you, it has sort of been a journey on the inside, trying to really figure out who you are and what you want to be in life.
Yeah.
I guess partly for you as well, and then you ended up just trying 17,000 different things.
17,000? You almost exaggerate as much as I do.
No, but I mean, when I researched your history a little, it turns out you have been in various fields, also with VP Cash, for instance. It's more in the financial and payment sector, which not necessarily relates to what you've been doing before, right?
Yeah, I mean, I started my first business when I was 22, and I was working in advertising. I really loved that opportunity, and I got, because I was in my hometown that I grew up in, and I mentioned before, I was able to sort of just work to prove myself, and then okay, we'll make you a senior account manager, and then okay, you can be the acting sales manager. So I got these responsibilities, and I think it was from there that I just, because of having that curiosity of business and having such a breadth of, I was working with like the big car dealers in the town to like, the beauty stores, or, like an IT company. It's like so different. And I'd be like, can you show me out the back of the shed, or what's going on? And I think just like that curiosity, and I mean, my first exposure to entrepreneurship was with my grandparents. So they came from Italy, this super small town with like 2,000 people. And when my grandfather met my grandmother, her and her mother they had a what's it called, green grocer, kind of like they were growing vegetables in the backyard, and they were selling from the home. And my grandfather was like, all right, how about we set up like a truck and put it in the town, and then we sell from the truck. And that started going really well, and then they, rented a place in town, and they built that up, and then, they had enough money to then buy their own commercial site. And so, like, I would go into the shop when I was a kid, and I'd be like, oh, Nana, Grandpa, can I have this ice cream, or can I do this? Like, yeah, have anything you like. And I saw them working, and they were working from like the crack of dawn, and they'd come home late at night, and they'd be counting the cash, and I would have the smell of cash, and I was like, and I just saw how they created this little mini empire for our family, just how they supported the family, and I just admired it so much. And it was kind of like, my grandfather came over as an 18-year-old with his brother, and they got jobs as labourers, and they didn't speak a word of English. And, working, ploughing the fields, and, they were really hard workers because that's what they were doing in Calabria. And, one of the managers was like, mate, slow down. And he thought they're saying, speed up, like faster. So he's working harder. And, so that kind of work ethic and that exposure to what it was to run a business really inspired me. And then when I kind of got to a point with the advertising where it's like, I can't do the things I want to do. I'm being told what to do. I don't want to be told what to do. I've got ideas. It's like the popcorn brain. It's like, this is what's possible. And I felt hemmed in. And so I wanted to be able to create my own scope. So it was after that I started a creative agency, and I was like, that's where I can put my ideas together and work on steps to get these, clients from A to B, and it doesn't have to be through the medium of TV or radio or whatever else. So that kind of was like the starting point to then, when technology came in, it was, okay, well, we have to learn about, social media is coming for businesses, so business pages. So okay, how do we set that up and get people learning about that? So we did that, and then it was static websites to interactive websites, and it's like, how do you build a relationship with your customers through websites? So that's where the IT or the tech wasn't much tech, but then that came in.
Oh, that's interesting. It seems like your grandparents have played such a crucial role in it. it seems interesting, you know, in terms of if you go out into the world and find role models and be like, I like this person and this is cool. It seems a very common strategy. And I wonder, Catherine, you work at, or your business is located at LIA, as I understood, which is a health incubator for startups in Oslo.
Yeah.
But do you have any role models, or is there like a lot of people around you interact with? And I'm assuming a lot of the ideas come from interaction with other people. So do you have role models, and who are they?
Well, good question. Well, definitely there are many good alumni companies from ALE, from Startup Lab, within the Oslo Science Park community.
Yeah.
But also from NTNU School of Entrepreneurship, as I mentioned, we have an alumni network of, I think it's about 400 people now, still sharing ideas, asking questions. I think those are kind of role models for me. Not necessarily people that have had a huge success, but people that have they have just done it, tried, and either failed or succeeded, but been really inspiring.
Yeah, I would assume so. And Charlotte, I'm curious, like, you know, I've learned you sit on like several you're board member in several other companies in business, and you have your own, and there's a team. So actually, you mentioned earlier, you played some soccer in your earlier years. Do you still find the time to do that, or where do you recharge, or is it like 24/7, 7 days a week?
It's probably, it's hard work running a business, and it's not easy. So you gotta have the stamina to kind of go through the ups and downs if you want to make a successful business. And we've been lucky enough to have a lot of people around us. And also in the past, when I started the company, I was looking for role models, like who is a female tech entrepreneur that is doing great, for example. Not a lot of choices out there, some, but not a lot. So it was a bit hard, and I needed to learn like just how to build a company and who had done it successfully. So looking at great role models or great people around the world was important, because I needed to learn everything from people that had gone through it and succeeded. Instead of everybody talking about, learn from the ones that have made the mistakes, but I prefer to learn from the ones who actually have succeeded, and not only have a lot of mistakes, but also can show big successes and global successes. Because I think, just to kind of step away from your question, but one of the things that I see, especially in Norway, is the ambitions are so low. Like, for anybody starting a business, you should have big ambitions, because most likely you will not be able to kind of reach your top goal. But if you have those great goals and ambitions, you would definitely get closer to that than if you have a smaller ambition. And I think that's one of the things I've seen have been hard in Norway, if I were to talk from my own experience, is that I was thinking too big, and people told me, no, we're in Norway, we need to kind of stay in our lane. And that was, and I've also been to Silicon Valley and kind of gotten that feel of the startup scene. The good thing there is that they actually work, but they have to work because they don't have the safety nets as we do in Norway. So I think I would like to see more entrepreneurs that actually kind of work as if they have someone running after them with a knife or something. Because I think we can do more in Norway. We are so many good, smart people with creative minds and skill sets that could be utilized even better. And especially seeing COVID, where we have seen a lot of people losing their job, and the gap between female and men has just increased. I think creating companies and creating innovation would be so important, and then thinking big and just running for it, I think would be a good thing moving forward. Yeah.
No, it's interesting what you mentioned. I mean, it was so since this talk is somehow related a little also to International Women's Day, I learned on Monday actually this day dates quite back to female activists before the First World War. So it's more than
1909, the suffragettes.
Yeah. So I learned quite a bit on Monday. It was interesting.
Nice.
And it's been such a long period for many women, they have come a long way. So especially working in the tech scene, from my understanding, this is still an area which is predominantly run by men. So what is your experience as young female leaders? Ever had any trouble there, or ran through a couple of doors, closed doors, I would highlight?
Who wants to start?
Maybe Catherine, do you want to start?
Well, to be honest, I haven't really thought that much about it.
Yeah.
It hasn't been a huge problem, except some small situations.
Yeah.
You know, like I got a phone call from a guy telling me that he thought I shouldn't join the meeting because I was blonde, young and girl kind of.
Oh.
But I think that was one time, so it wasn't a huge problem, but it made me really mad. And
I believe that, huh?
yeah, I just don't understand what the big differences are. But anyways, I won't work with him anymore. But yeah, other than that, I think people are really nice and they are thinking about it, that you are taking this step into the career as an entrepreneur, and it's really hard, and you take on, you know, tough decisions, and mostly open many doors for me, because yeah.
But is that something, I mean, you all have to made your way to Silicon Valley at some point in your life, working there or visiting or whatever. But it seems like, is this a, you know, if you feel like gender equality is more prevalent in Norway, is that because you get the experience from other places, or can you compare it, or is Norway just a particularly well-established place for gender equality? What do you think, Charlotte?
Just based on my own experience, I have had bad situations happen in Norway as well. So I don't necessarily think I can say that it's related to the country.
Okay.
So I think definitely, like, facts is it's harder to be a female entrepreneur than it is to be a male entrepreneur. Basically because men have kind of gotten to take that road earlier than females.
Yeah.
And then I would say, just to kind of also make people aware, it's hard being a female entrepreneur, especially if you're, because there is a shift of, or there's a divide in power, and it's being used for bad in a lot of cases. So it's good to be aware of it. You could be a female entrepreneur and have like your entire journey be fine, but in most cases you will, in some shape or form, be kind of faced with a challenge. So I would say not to go into much of the challenges, but I would definitely say that for females you just have to be aware of it. Just and I think if I was to speak in regards to COVID as well now, for me, stepping away from meeting investors or meeting customers that are not good has been good. So the networking scene has actually been better in regards to that side of things.
You can choose who you want to meet.
And you don't, as a female entrepreneur, get the bad things about being a female entrepreneur. So I think in a lot of cases that has helped, especially if I'm just talking about my own experience. And then just being aware of it is so important, because I have had to stop drinking at events and stuff like that. So there are things, and I've reported people and I've hit people and stuff like that, so it can get So I just want to make sure that people are aware of it. And being female, and it doesn't help to have blue hair and tattoos and piercings and stuff like that. People are like,
that sounds harsh. I wasn't aware it's that bad out there.
It's definitely different from who you're talking to, but that's based on my own experience.
And then Marion, how has it been for you meeting so many different customers and companies?
I think I've been lucky in some senses. I actually wrote a post in doing this event today about, there's a lot of people saying like, I'm not a woman entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm not female. And it's like, whether or not it's, it's the good thing to say I'm a female entrepreneur or not, like there are stark differences for people who are, don't fit into the sort of, the Silicon Valley kind of bro code, let's say, version of an entrepreneur. And I think, for me, when I was in politics, I actually had this roundtable discussion of women in business, and we got all the entrepreneurs, like these really well-known international businesswomen, around the table to talk about the subject of what can we do to promote more women in business. And for me, I sort of was like, I don't really see, maybe there's, on the Me Too side, that's certainly something, but is there a difference in opportunities? So I kind of was questioning that. And I got a draft report back from the Department of Industry that I was working with to do this discussion, and seeing all the stats of the underrepresentation, especially women in tech, and the challenges faced, of the lack of exposure, these kinds of things, I was like, holy shit. One, I have to recognise my privilege in a way, and two, my cognitive biases, to just make the assumption of like, maybe this is just how it is because of my experiences. And it was through that that I realised there's so much more to do, so much more to put on the agenda. And with any minority group or minority in an industry, women are obviously not minorities, being 50% on average of the population, but in terms of like women in particular business roles or in startups or in, X industry are minorities, just as there's minorities in LGBTQ and, all these different areas. So I think it's really important to be able to raise awareness of the challenges and give other people who face those challenges a leg up. So I've worked with women entrepreneurs who have come to me and said, I was in tears because of something that someone said, or, these comments of like being a little woman or this kind of thing. And I think for me, I'm just lucky because I started out working with stale, pale males, let's say, when I was 18. So I found a way to hold my ground, and I had people to look up to who were doing the same thing. So it was kind of, that was my modus operandi from day one. But it wasn't until like almost a decade later that I realised like, this is really fortunate that I've had that experience. And so, yeah.
It seems like all you guys sort of had a struggle with this. I mean, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, it was just in regards to like female men. Yeah. I would say one of the benefits of being a female entrepreneur is the fact that you stand out, especially in tech. Yeah. So that's the good thing. So if you kind of find the positive of being a female within a more male-dominated profession, that's good, because then you can use that for what it's worth. Yeah. So standing out and looking different or being different could be used to such an advantage instead of a disadvantage. So it's definitely a lot of good things about being the only female in the room as well. But it's good to be aware of also the ugly sides of it.
Yeah, but it seems to me there's also somewhat a positive side to it. I understood on Monday you met the Prime Minister Erna Solberg, and so you guys are really sort of building a network of female entrepreneurs in politics and in the private sector getting together. And interestingly enough, I recently read an article from the British newspaper The Guardian, who is investigating this correlation between female leaders of nations and the impact COVID has. And it's really interesting if you look at Norway and New Zealand and Finland and Iceland. They are all doing really well in COVID, and they all have one thing in common: they have a female leader. So given that, do you think there should be more of an emphasizing on female leadership in the world, or is that something you would aspire to grow more in that direction? Maybe Charlotte, if you would like to start.
I would say definitely more female leaders.
Yeah.
There needs to be more female leaders, because there's so many great women out there that could be amazing leaders. It's just the matter of the question that most people ask me is, how do I kind of have the courage to start my own business? Yeah. I think that's one of the things that maybe women struggle with, just having the courage to take that leap, to start something new that they don't really know that they're perfect in, and so on. So I think getting more female leaders out there is so important, because there's not a lot of role models out there.
No.
So the more that we can be of role models, the better as well. And hopefully we can inspire someone to start a business or to do something on their own.
I think it's like you say, I think there seems to be a pattern of women need to have all their ducks lined up in a row. And I would say just start with the duck and do it afraid. Like you said, you know, in your studies, you were able to sort of fail forward. So it's like there were so many things that like effed up along the way. And it's just like you're not going to get it perfect the first time. You're going to bumble around. Maybe you'll have the same company, but you're going to screw up so many times. So it's kind of having this kind of, I want things to be perfect from the beginning, or it has to be secure, or it's just, there's such a big part of being in a startup or a leadership position that it's about the psychology and your emotional intelligence, and how do you know, it's from this self-awareness. So I'm aware that, you know, I have these things holding me back, or maybe this imposter syndrome or whatever it may be, but then going from that awareness to self-regulation, I think is really important. And that's why sometimes like having a mentor or someone who can support you and sort of work through those challenges when they're asking you like, okay, how do I have the courage? It's like sometimes I think you just need one person to really give a shit about you and really, you know, be in your corner and champion you, because you feel like, okay, this is possible. If they can break it down for you, help and be like a sparring partner, I think you can just go so far with that. So.
Catherine, how is that for you with female leaders and role models? Or do you have any political ambitions in the future?
Yeah, I'm just sitting and thinking about that. There should be, we need to do something about the education and getting in early. So getting in early in high school, but also during higher education, because for me that was really what made it. And I remember at high school here in Oslo, I attended, it was a program where I was able to travel to NTNU in Trondheim to visit the campus.
Yeah.
It's called the Jentedagene or something, like the Girls' Day. That was my first introduction with the university, with the technology, with the higher education in, all different technology areas, and I think like things like that, Gründerskolen,
and I think it's like you're touching on something that in this roundtable discussion was like one of the first things was just exposure, like getting exposure, whether it's in the schools or, you know, having role models, these kinds of things. Then it's like, okay, then you see someone that you can identify with. And I think that goes such a long way in saying, okay, well, I can sort of pursue this sort of passion or career. Sometimes you feel like you kind of have to pioneer and there's no one in front of you. You know, it's like, where do I find these, you know, role models? And you're sort of scraping around. Like I remember for so long trying to find a mentor, and I was like, a woman mentor who had been where I was, and I was just like, oh, I think I have to give up. Maybe I just wasn't looking hard enough, but it wasn't, they weren't at the time, at least readily available. So it's, you know, there's more things coming out now, but it's really challenging when you feel like you are sort of paving a way for yourself alone and you don't have anyone that you can really look up to.
Yeah, I was trying to look for someone with blue hair to be my mentor.
But it's interesting. I mean, this is it's also part of the responsibility we have as a university, and I have as an educator at the university. So I'm keeping on mental notes, and that almost made me forget. We have an audience which were asking a couple of questions. So Thea is raising a question to all of you, actually. So based on your experiences, if I wanted to connect with a mentor at some point, should I expect any struggles finding someone willing to mentor me? I think you partly addressed it already, but how was that experience for the two of you?
Yeah, I can definitely.
Yeah,
So I have a lot of mentors, and that was one of the major things that I looked for when starting the company, because I didn't know anything. I had to learn from someone. I basically, what I did was just figure out what I was bad at and started thinking about, okay, who was good at this and who was good in Norway and outside of Norway. So then I connected with them on LinkedIn and just kind of got introductions to them and asked them if they wanted to help. And like I would say, in all of the cases, everyone I've asked has said yes to help me. So getting a mentor isn't hard, you just have to ask for it and know what you're looking for. Because I think if you're asking someone to mentor you but you don't know what they are going to help you with or what they get in return, it's hard. But so you kind of have to be aware of what's your needs and what can you give also back to that person. Because a lot of the mentors, especially if they're a bit older, they want to teach people what they know to make sure that others learn from that. And they think it's fun being a mentor. So you also have to make sure that you make it fun for them and take them along on the journey and so on. So having mentors is extremely important and you just have to ask.
And it's a really low threshold here. Like the power distance is so low. So you can jump on LinkedIn and find a CEO and be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. And I think, like rarely do you not get an answer if you have a good narrative or, story to tell about why you want to have a virtual coffee or something with them.
But is that something you would generally give if you could give your 20-year-old version being a student or our students an advice, is that something you would heavily invest in, building your collection of mentors and supporters and people who guide you through your life and your business journey? Is that something the most important, or what would you recommend our students?
I would definitely recommend building a network of people around you that have the skill sets that you don't. And like everybody maybe have heard about, like have a room where you're not the smartest person so that you can learn from someone else. Because there's so many great people out there that are different from you, which is amazing. And then take learnings from that, and then people can learn from you. So I think, get the network around you and create something. And if I were to look back with when I was 20, I wish I started a company then. I didn't start a company before I was 28. So going back, I would say just go for it. You have basically nothing to lose. And if you lose it, you can always gain it again. Just have to work for it. Yeah.
Now this is a question actually Caroline just
Sorry,
raised.
I just want to add
please.
one more thing to that actually, because I think that while mentorship's important, just like get out and get your hands dirty. Go and ask, like find some startups, hub.no, go and work for one, volunteer or like do an internship. I know you've had, like here, we're looking for interns. So find companies that connect with what you're passionate about and intern. It could be 3 months, it could be 6, it could turn into a job opportunity. But the biggest thing is just like do something to help and get your hands dirty. And I think it's the same as whether you're a student or coming to a new country. It's like I said before, if you can find things that, if you know your skill sets and you say this is how I can contribute, like no one would ever say no, we don't want you to contribute to this really valuable thing that I don't have, that I need, but you have. It's like, so I think that's a really great thing for students, because then by the time you finish university, you can say, oh, I worked in this startup and I, was tried out, UX design or product management, or I did this and that. It might be totally different to your study of engineering or behavioral science, but the point is when you're in an early stage startup, you do so many things. And I think that's the best kind of test bed for finding out what you're passionate about, but just being useful. I think, like being, identifying what's really, interesting to you takes time.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to do it.
That was wonderful. It's good advice for our students. A question we had from the audience, from Kenneth, he was pretty much asking, how do you get the money to start your own business, your startup? Where do you find grants and investors? I mean, Catherine, you had this wonderful program at NTNU, but I guess you have made your own experience with that. From what I understood, you had a round last week where you're trying to acquire more money. So how did this work out for you?
To
To begin with, it's mainly Innovation Norway. So we were fortunate to get a grant there in 2019 and a new grant last year due to COVID. And then we've got some grants from the Norwegian Research Council and also the Regional Research Council in Oslo. Yeah, and then EU funds. So those three, I think, are the main important ones. But then you should probably also try to have some early revenue coming in.
I was going to say that before investing.
Get the customers.
I would just be like, the first thing, and this is, I've been working through the modules with the Charge program, and most of them are in like ideation stage. And we often, whether it's there or anywhere else, it's like, where do we find investors? What can we do? How do we get funding? It's like, no, that's not the start, because you need to show that there is a market for what you're what you're doing, and you have to test that somehow. So create, it's so easy on like sites like Wix or Squarespace to just set up a website or a landing page saying this is what we're building, like connect and be one of our early customers, or sign up to get information and updates. So you get some sort of validation that, okay, there is a market for the product X or service X that we're offering.
Yeah.
So the first thing before looking for funding and quitting your day job or whatever else is just testing something and being willing to bootstrap a bit, and then you go, you have a much stronger case for Innovation Norway. And then if you can have that sort of early validation, then you get the 150,000 grant, say for example, from them. It goes into building a better website.
Norwegian
or
kroner,
app.
right?
Sorry,
Yeah.
did I say dollars?
No, you said nothing, but I was like, if it's dollars, I should start my own business.
Krona. So then that kind of kick starts, but that's not your money to pay yourself a salary.
Yeah.
That's for building the tech and getting, something more substantial up and running. And then the next phase, the commercialization, which is 750,000 NOK, that's going into trying to find your product market fit, and maybe you need other people for that, but you're going to have a pretty low salary for a pretty long time.
Yeah.
So it's really like having the right expectations up front of like, what's the idea, how do you test it, you're going to probably need to experiment, whether it's with the content or how you offer the services, doing pilots with your customers, etc., getting lots of feedback, then start thinking about investing. But don't think about it as soon as you get an idea.
Wonderful. So one last please Charlotte.
Yeah, because I totally agree. And one of the things is that not that much in Norway, but we see it increasing in Norway, that everybody that starts a company expects to get investors on board and investment money. And especially when you look at Silicon Valley, all they talk about is getting investment money. And as you mentioned, like, start getting your first customer. It's so important. I think in my case, I still had my day job when I started the company in December 2017. And I didn't quit my job before at the middle of 2018. So I kind of bootstrapped, and we had our first paying customers. We did Innovation Norway and so on. But it's so important to think about the customer and not getting just the free money, but actually validating the fact that you have an idea that somebody wants to pay for. It's harder in research and more medical and stuff like that. But if you're outside of that scene, get a customer, get someone to pay for it, and then you can kind of build on that.
Sounds like a wonderful advice. Unfortunately, this session is approaching its end already, but we have a last question from Carolina, who wants to know, what would you like to say to all these women, also our female students out there who want to start their company? Any advice?
I've talked too much about
Thinking the same thing.
Well, just go for it, just do it, and ask for help. I ask for help everywhere I can, and build a network, get mentors.
And Marion?
I would say find a community, so where you can get something up and running as well. Maybe if you haven't done anything on entrepreneurship yet, maybe if you're an international in Norway, join Startup Migrants, or there's plenty of meetups or events, things like that, where it's sort of like, how do you get an idea off the ground? I mean, I did a workshop actually on that the other day, and yeah, I think it's just, that's also a way to build your community and your knowledge, but it's just kind of, I think you just have to do it afraid, whether you're a woman or any other gender. I think you just have to give it a go and not kind of go, okay, this is this huge thing that if it doesn't work, it's just, being fearful of the failure, like sort of lean into the failure, like, okay, this could probably just F up at any moment, but that's okay, I'm just trying this out. Like, have fun with it. See it like science, in science it's always testing and experimenting and trying to prove itself wrong, and it's not I think it's this kind of ongoing process of, it's not failure, it's just experimentation until you come to something that works. So I think it's the same for, starting out in a business. You might have an idea, but if you're hard-nosed on your idea, that's the entrepreneur's bias. But then, you can't let your customers develop and grow with you. So just test it out, put it out there and see how it grows. So. Just like get on Wix, Squarespace, whatever free site, and just set up a landing page now. That's what I would say.
When I read this great line in a book once, it sort of mentioned like you don't always need to know, very philosophical in a way, but you don't always need to know where you would like to end up, but you should sort of develop a sense of direction of where you're heading. And I think. Charlotte, what would you say about, or what's your advice for our female students?
I definitely agree. It's just a matter of doing it, and I think we are extremely lucky in regards to being in Norway or in the Nordic in general, because we have the safety nets of, okay, if it doesn't work, you can go back to school. You have NAV. You have a lot of support systems in Norway. So starting a business in Norway is not a risk in itself. If it had been any other country where you had to sleep on the street and didn't have a home and so on, it would be more of a risk. But in Norway, you have you have your parents that probably can also help you with finances and so on. You're able to start working at Kiwi or other places if something goes wrong. So I think just making sure that you understand that it's not that risky. And it's more of a risk not to take the risk, because you will regret it. So, do you want to be 90 and say you didn't do something?
Yeah.
And I would say, yes, I completely agree with the Norwegian system. As a foreigner, especially out of the EEA, it is a bit different and challenging. But if anyone is a foreigner in any of the students and they want to do it and it's not on the student visa, you can, I'm sure we're all, contact us, or you'll send out details or find us at LinkedIn or something. LinkedIn's good for me. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to be a sounding board.
So I think for our students out there, this is quite wonderful. You just got this big offer, go out, ask the questions. I think it was for me, how did I get these 3 women here? I just asked, and it was actually quite easy. So I hope for you students and everyone else at home watching this, that we got a bit of inspiration into you, of reaching out to others, ask for help, and then hopefully you find the journey you want to go down in life. With that being said, that was it from our side for today. Thanks for joining this first session of the Makerspace Inspirational Series, and please stay tuned for the next few weeks. We have a couple more events popping up, so stay tuned on social media and we will notify you as soon as possible. Thank you.